Van Dyck now, who moves into the lead. The Race Bets Derby trial goes to Anthony Van Dyck.
One name jumps off the page of Anthony Van Dyck's fact file because if the King George was a dad's race, there'd be only one winner. Anthony Van Dyck is by Galileo. Now, Galileo, if Helen of Troy launched 1,000 ships, Galileo launched 1,000 winners. 1,500 winners to be precise, including 195 group winners and counting, and 80 Group 1 winners, of which the 78th was Anthony Van Dyck. We often talk about the dynasty of Galileo, his supercharged stallion status. But how about Galileo, the racehorse, who won this back in 2001? Mick Cannan used to say about this horse that it was like riding a race in slow motion, in that he had all moves covered. And you can see the true talent and the power of Galileo as he leads the field on the outside under no less than Frankie Dettori. This is Fantastic Light, and this was to be a running battle through the season. Fantastic Light at one stage even heads Galileo. But when you think of Galileo and you think of those genes that he has passed on, you think of power, but principally staying power. And look at the way in which Galileo sails on so strongly at the end to draw away from Fantastic Light. That last 100 yards is so significant, especially when you compare him to so many of his offspring. And this is Anthony Van Dyck. This was the launch pad to his 3-year-old season. It came at Lingfield. And again, many of the same characteristics and qualities are in play. Nothing flashy, but certainly on autopilot. On his reappearance, and such a steady, slow build-up through the race, and it looks like a scramble at one stage, but it turns into a procession because those Galileo genes are kicking in. Now, this, of course, was the forerunner to what he did at Epsom in the Derby itself. Different type of approach in that he came from off the pace, but this proved to be just a taster for what was to come, because at Epsom, in the pink colours this time, as one of the outsiders of the Ballydoyle contingent, he stormed up in the finish towards the inside to land the greatest race of them all, beating a clutch of horses who were on his inside. Now, of course, he went to the Irish Derby and failed there, but I wouldn't hold that against him. It was a disconnected race, a disjointed race, in which he had little chance with Sovereign. And don't forget that a world without Sovereign, we're dealing in a dual Derby winner with Anthony Van Dyck. Now, Derby winners rarely go near the King George in recent times, certainly not in the same year. But if we look at the record of not just Derby winners, but Epsom Classic winners, it paints a better picture, a more favourable picture of Anthony Van Dyck. The 3 fillies who came included 2 winners and then back to Galileo. So Anthony Van Dyck, age is the key. It's not just who he's trained by or how he's bred, it's the 3-year-old. He gets that allowance, and the King George is about limits. We simply don't know the limits of Anthony Van Dyck, and that makes him a potential threat to enable the one horse in the field who she's never come up against.